I'm Jean DeMarco, co-chair of the Wildlife Committee. Our speaker this afternoon is Sue Tepper, a friend of Lake Monticello who has done several programs for us in the past, and it's my pleasure to welcome her again. Sue is a retired business executive who moved back to Fluvanna in 2014. She is a master gardener and works very hard on the native plant butterfly garden at Pleasant Grove. Besides being involved in many Fluvanna Master Gardener activities, she trains new Master Gardeners as well. We're so grateful that she's taking the time to be with us, and I'll now turn the program over to Sue.
Thank you, Jean. Well, it's really, really nice to be here with you this afternoon and to be able to talk a little bit about, I say, fall gardening and mix it in with some native plant interest and information. So I want to start with Pleasant Grove Park. And the reason that I want to talk about that is how many of you have never been to Pleasant Grove Park? All right, so for those of you who haven't been, it's time to go. But when you pull in, you're going to see the monument sign, and the monument sign very clearly now points out to turn left to go to the butterfly garden. And the master gardeners, with the help of the master naturalists, the Native Plant Society, Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, which is the Wildlife, Department of Wildlife, now put together or came up with an idea to put in a native plant garden at Pleasant Grove Park to be used as a demonstration of native plants for homeowners in the county of Fluvanna. And it went in 2015, and it has been a process of getting plants planted, fighting weeds, fighting deer, getting enough people to help maintain and weed and all of those things. But slowly over the years, and with the help of COVID, when everything got shut down and we had nothing else to do except go out and start working in our garden, we really started restoration of that garden. It had gotten to be quite a weed patch by 2019. We started restoration in 2020 when everything got locked down, and the garden has really been brought back. It has had a lot of new plants added to it. And we have had a family in Fluvanna who has been very, very interested and involved in the garden. And they have, through their sweat equity and their own resources, have donated to us that deer fencing that you see, the lovely arbor that you see. Inside of the garden, there was some irrigation put in. Water was brought to the garden, irrigation. So in those hot summer months, we could at least give those plants a little bit of moisture. So some edging went into the garden. The garden is beautiful. How many of you have had a chance to walk through that garden? Okay. And how many of you have seen it evolve from the weed patch that it was at one time to what it is today? So, all right. So I can't plug enough. We put in hundreds of hours out there to maintain and add, and we love that garden with passion. So we would like for everyone in Fluvanna to take a stroll through. As you go right through that gate, right on the left is a little brochure rack, and it has a brochure. And inside of it is a list of native plants that were the plants that were initially installed in the garden. So it gives you a good idea, a good starting point if you're thinking of doing something in your own yard. So, but I always have to plug because I don't consider myself a native plant expert. And so when Jean said, what do you think about, doing a native plant program? I'm like, but I do have experience and I love to talk about fall gardening. So really, autumn exists to remind us that everything must end to begin again. And I saw that quote recently and I'm like, isn't that the truth? You know, as we start to wind down, we will see things start to go into their dormancy and start to fade away. And by, January, things are gone. And by February, you think the garden is dead. But then March rolls around and little green starts to come back up. So it's the cycle of the garden. But when we're starting to wind down in our own gardens, the first thing that we're going to want to start thinking about is some general cleanup in that garden. You're going to want to just stroll, take a look, do your initial cleanup, but wait until after the first frost to really do your heavy cleanup. Now's the time to take your steps to do some soil improvement, divide or plant your perennials. Now's the time to do that. Put some annuals in for some fall color so you've got something in your garden for some interest. And it's time, if you're going to put down mulch in your garden, now's the time to think about doing that. And I wanted to put in there that native plants don't like to be mulched. So they prefer, soil that is just left alone. If you're going to put some mulching down around native plants, be sure that you leave room around the plant. Don't plant or don't mulch directly up to the plant. So how did the garden, summer's end, you can see what the garden looked like in July. It's beautiful, it's green, there's a lot of flowering going on. But a couple months later, September, I took this picture a couple weeks ago, and you can see the garden beginning to go into its dormancy. Things are beginning to turn brown. Things are beginning to die back. We've deadheaded a few things out there. This is a great time to start walking around your yard or your garden and starting to do an evaluation on it. What did you have that you didn't like the place it was in? You didn't particularly like the plant itself. You really think you want more of something there. There's a hole in your garden you want to fill in. It's a good time to see all of that because there's still enough plant growth there to let you know where things were and where you might have had some open spots. So it's a great time just to walk around and evaluate your garden. Leave your plant, as much of the plant stem and seeds as possible, as you can tolerate in your garden. Let me put it that way. Because I will tell you, the goldfinches have worked those seed heads to no end. That's a food source for them. And also all of the stems and all of that that is left there also becomes a habitat. It becomes a shelter for insects in the wintertime. They need that. So if you can tolerate, leave some of that standing. Now's the time to really think if you've got some things, I didn't like where that was, or we planted that there and everything grew on top of it because I didn't realize the things around it were going to get so big. Great time to dig up and relocate the plant right now. So if you just, even on a day like today, we're still sunny, we're still warm, the ground's still warm. It's cool enough for us to get out and work without sweating to death, without bugs chewing us up the whole time we're out working. So this is just a great time. Let's dig up some of those things that we want to put in a different place in our garden and relocate them. And it's a good time for anything in your perennials that needs to be divided and transplanted. And just for an example, these were Stokes asters that got divided and replanted. So poor little things, they just look terrible, once you divide them, and they wilt and they like this. But the following year, they're fabulous because they needed to be divided. The health of the plant will be so much better if you're dividing and separating them. So look for those open spots. I want to put some more low-growing Stokes asters in. I'm going to divide and plop them in. It's the right time to add new plant species. So if you have some thoughts on some plants that you'd like to put in, now's even a better time to put perennials in than spring, because spring is almost, you're just going to warm up really fast and you can barely get them in the ground and they start to dry out. So they struggle more in the spring when you plant than they do in the fall. So the fall gives them time for their root systems to get started and for them really to flourish come springtime. So I will show you another example. These were asters and oxide sunflowers that we put in. And I would not do that combination again because the oxide sunflowers are high enough, tall enough that they really have blocked out the asters. So really, we need to take that plot as it starts dying back a little bit, and it is right now, and rework some of that, get those asters out where we can see them. So it's an example of, it seemed like a good idea to put those two colors together, yellow and purple at the end, autumn, but it didn't really work so well once the plants actually grew. So it's the time to, in your gardens at home, and you're going to put annuals in, it's time to plant for winter color. So, some pansies, the perfect time, your flowering kale and mustard, your showy vegetable plants, Swiss chard, and chrysanthemums. And can anyone looking at this picture tell me what is unusual about it? Yeah, very good. So this was my fall planting that I took a picture of in spring. I looked at that picture and I'm like, eh. So there's my fall color. I put those pansies in fall, and there they are the next spring. So, but it's time to plant for your winter color now. So again, if you put those pansies in now, you're still going to have them in the springtime for color. It's also the time to put in, and we're almost just a little on the downside of that. They really should have gone in September, but this is the time to put your spring blooming bulbs in. And just not to fight, I'm going to tell you, plant daffodils and save yourself all the heartache of having the deer eat your tulips and your hyacinths and everything else they're going to eat here in Fluvanna. But educate yourself on daffodils. There are like 50 plus varieties of daffodils. You could plant so many different kinds and have such a variety in the springtime of daffodil flowers without having to worry about the deer coming in and eating them all to the ground. So, how many of you fight constantly with the deer? Okay, it's a room full of hands. And I know that's such a big issue for us. I know it is for you at the lake because your deer are not afraid of anything. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that too. So if it was me, I lived at the lake, I would become a daffodil expert. And that's what I would put in. And I would put in the ones that bloom early. And I would put in the ones, there's a late blooming white daffodil. How many of you know Marvin Moss? That name ring a bell? So Marvin has a daffodil meadow at his place. Glen Burnie is the name of his farm. And he has a daffodil meadow, and he has a white daffodil garden. It's the last thing that blooms. So that garden is blooming in April, where everything else has come in much earlier, but it's beautiful. He's planted thousands of daffodil bulbs on his property, and it's a beautiful garden in the springtime. So for those of you with a lawn, now is the time to be doing something with your lawn. And of course you're going to read, and I think I saw something over here on reducing your lawn. So cut your lawn in half. We've got that brochure. And I think we do recommend that you think about reducing the amount of lawn that you have, but people are going to want a little bit of lawn. Now's the time to take care of your lawn. It's the prime time. So you're going to want to test your soil if you haven't done that on your lawn. And we've got some soil test kits over here to see what you're going to need to apply. And almost always here, you're going to need to put some lime on your lawn. So your test results will come back, and you will know how much you need to put in. And then you're going to overseed with some kind of fall fescue blend. But For those of you who need to do lawn, need to work on your lawn, want to work on your lawn, now's the time, okay? Now we get to one of my favorite things to talk about here. So let's talk about trees. And who can tell me what our most essential native tree is? Oak tree. Very good. Oaks. So that is why Doug Tallamy wrote The Nature of Oaks. So in North America, our forests, back before we decimated them for many reasons over many years, 25% of our forest was made up of oaks. And there are many, many different varieties across the country. But in Virginia, we have, I think, 15 variety of oaks. In Fluvanna, you're generally going to see the white and the red oaks. So Tallamy's quote was, "Oaks support more fine forms of life and more fascinating interactions than any other tree genus in Northern America." So the reason that I bring that up is when we talk about native plants often, we talk about the flowering things. We talk about the pollinators, and we talk about, blooms and color and all that. We don't spend as much time talking about shrubs and trees. And yet the tree, the oak tree, is probably one of the most important native plants that we have. And we have lots of them here in Fluvanna. So I want to draw your attention to that because they are a food and protection source for much of our wildlife. Birds, rodents, bears, raccoons, possums, snakes and tree lizards, butterflies and moths, gall, wasps, spiders, and weevils, all of them are using that oak tree as a food source, a shelter source, a protection source. So it's a very important tree. So I went out into my own backyard and I shot these pictures. I'm like doing this. And when you put out your bird feeders, if you do, if you're not afraid that the bear are going to come and rip your bird feeder apart, the little seed mice or the little seed birds will start to take those seeds and they'll run over and they'll start to tuck it into that tree trunk because they're going to start storing for the winter. And then there's going to be another bird, like a blue jay, sits and watches them do it. And then he's going to go over and he's going to take the seed out of there that they just put in there. But that scraggly trunk is full of insects. The woodpeckers will be very busy on those trees in the wintertime. The other little birds will be storing away there. Squirrels will be up and down and all around building their little nests in those trees. As I was standing looking up, I'm like, there's no acorns on that tree. And I kind of kept walking around. I'm like, there's no acorns on that tree. So acorns are also a huge food source. And one oak tree will produce 3 million acorns itself in its lifetime. And the prime time for an oak tree to produce acorns is between 50 and 70 years of age. So the tree has to be pretty grown to be a good producer of acorns. But look at everything that is going to feed off of that. I mean, it is feeding our wildlife. And so we want to pay attention. White-tailed deer, and I know how much all of you love that. 75% of their fall diet, if they don't have acorns, they're eating your yard and your plants that you've worked so hard to do something with. So when I looked up in that tree and I'm like, I don't see any acorns up there, I started thinking about masting. Does anybody know what masting is? Okay, so oak trees go through periods where they produce a massive quantity of acorns. So an oak tree generally will produce about 2,000 acorns a year. In a masting year, which is usually every 3 to 5 years, they'll produce 10,000. A tree will produce 10,000 acorns. Okay, it's called masting. They don't really know, they don't really understand exactly why and how it happens, or the cycle of it, or what is it? Is it environmental? Is it rainfall? Is it drought? Is it this? Is it that? They just know that it happens. And they know that it affects the wildlife and what will happen with them. So I'm like, let's just look on the Department of Wildlife, Natural Resources. Last year was a masting year. So if anybody remembers, you had acorns everywhere, 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 everywhere. They're probably still out there now. This year, they are the lack of white acorn production, let's see, is extremely poor for this year. Okay, 2023, what they are seeing is that it's going to be an extremely poor year for acorns. What does that mean for the deer in your yard? Okay, so it's all part of the whole cycle of things, and as homeowners, we want to kind of learn and know about these things. And what can I do, if anything? I just know that last year those deer could eat all those acorns because they were there for them. This year, they're not going to be there for them. So what do I need to do a little bit different maybe? The same thing, the bear. The bear are going to be eating those acorns. Well, what if they're not there? They're going to be coming after your bird feeders, before they go off into hibernation. And I think, Jack, you may have a thought or two on bear and hibernation and how all of that goes. So you may be hearing from Jack on a little bit about bears, but the acorn production is going to affect what happens with them. But as we go in here now to fall, what happens is we are about to have our season's most abundant crop. And those leaves are fuel for next year's garden. Leaves are packed with trace minerals and things that feed the garden and feed the earthworms and the microbes that are down underneath of it. Leaves can lighten the heavy soils, they make attractive mulch, they provide carbon for your compost, and they insulate your tender plants. So leaves are a wonderful thing. So if you walk out to the forest floor, you're going to see a leaf, what I call a leaf mat. And you can come up and see this afterwards, but I went out and dug up this little leaf mat because I wanted you to see when it's actually on the forest floor, it's packing down this flat layer of leaves. And this is going to help hold in moisture. It's going to create a place for insects and all of the soil bioherd, we call it, that's going to work down there all year long. It gives it a place, it protects it and keeps it moist, okay? This, if you have it on your yard, it will not do the same thing. It's going to end up rotting everything that you're trying to grow. So as we start to have the leaves fall, and I just took some leaves that had fallen in my yard, so this is what we're going to get now, and there's lots of it. And as I drove through the lake, I'm like, you have more leaves down here now than we have down at my house on Union Mills Road, which is interesting. What I like and what we do at our house is we gather these in whatever way. Well, we start first by mowing them into our lawn. So while that first light layer of leaves starts to fall and we are still mowing our grass, we're mowing those leaves and we're mowing them into the lawn because they're going to provide a food source, a compost source, an aeration source. They're going to hold some moisture in. But then we're going to reach a point where there's way more leaves coming down than we can mow into the lawn. And at that point, we're going to start gathering them. And at our house, we've got about an acre that we mow, which is ridiculous, but nonetheless, we have a leaf vacuum actually. So we drive our mower and suck those leaves up into the vacuum, and then they get dumped either on a place where we want to put them or we start a pile. And what I wanted to show you, so this is chopped leaves. And this is from last fall because we haven't actually started to chop yet. There's the difference, okay? This starts to be something, and you can come up and look at this. This starts to be something that you can use now, where this, you can't do much with it, and if you leave it on your lawn, you leave it on your bed, it's going to mat down when it gets wet. This moisture is going to go right through. This is a really usable thing, so chopped leaves. And for some people, I want to have a big riding lawnmower. Well, you can take a push mower, and you can, if it has a bagger on it, even better, because it's going to collect all those leaves. Just get your leaves in an area where you can run that mower over them, chop them up, and keep them. I've even heard, if you don't even have that, and you need something even smaller and more contained, get a galvanized garbage pail and take a string trimmer, put those leaves in there, take a string trimmer, chop them up, and then you've got them stored, and you've got, an easy way to do that because you're going to use this stuff. So as a mulch, and it makes better mulch than anything. Don't go buy your wood mulch and those kinds of things when you can use leaf mulch instead. It's going to break down better. It's better for your soil. If you're going to put it on your flower bed, you want about 2 to 3 inches. Any more than that, and you start to keep the moisture and rain from getting into the soil. So don't get it too deep on your flower beds. If you're doing a vegetable garden and you've got some of your cold hardy plants out there, they would love a mulch cover going into the winter. And then around your trees and shrubs, 3 to 6 inches of that. And all it does is it protects and it starts to add to and improve the soil. The worms are going to come up underneath all of that, and they're going to have a field day. So you will have, very healthy soil. If you've got an area that's just straight red clay, yellow clay, gray clay, any of the clays that we have here, and you want to improve that, this is your way to do it. So get in there and add a good mixture of those chopped leaves into that soil. If you want it to break down faster, add some nitrogen fertilizer. That'll help break it down faster and put it to use, so it's ready to plant in the springtime. If you have a compost bin, leaves make a great add to that to help break things down faster. And again, if the leaves are chopped, it all breaks down much, much faster. Oak leaves are very, very tough. So if oak is one of the things that you're putting into your leaf and you're putting it in whole, it does not break down very fast. But if you can get it chopped up. So then, say I didn't use all of my chopped leaves, and I now have a nice pile that I am going to keep for a year or two and let it keep breaking down. I get this. Now tell me you wouldn't like that to add to all of your flower pots, to everything that you were going to, use for new planting. Is that beautiful? Beautiful. I love it. So I love to talk about leaves because we have more leaves than we know what to do with. And if we are able to actually process them a little bit, think about how we can use them, you have just wonderful stuff to work with. And it's free, and it's outside, and it's native. It rivals peat moss in water retention. So when you're adding that into your mix of potted plants and those kinds of things, or anything else, you don't have to add peat moss. This will do the same thing. So before everything is finished, and it's getting colder out now, we've been working on our leaves for weeks, and we're about ready for all this to be over because the whole leaf thing gets old pretty darn fast. But now's really time before it's all over to get our tools cleaned up, winterized, time to clean them, sharpen them, paint or oil handles, get things organized. Don't just throw it all in the shed because I'm tired of all this now and oh good God, not again. Instead, take the time, take care of your tools, organize everything. You'll be very happy in the springtime when you get ready to go to work and everything is neatly organized and ready to go. So, one of the things for fall gardening is to winterize your tools. And then you want to make sure that you go through and drain all of your hoses so you don't have anything that freezes in there. And store, if you've got a hose reel, something to put it on so it's not just laying on the ground for you to trip over. And you know, we're all getting older and we don't need to trip on our hose. And then turn over clay and concrete pots, those kinds of things to keep them from cracking. Because I don't know if any of you have, you know, lovely pots that have cracked because you didn't take the time to empty them or turn them over. I have. So now's a good time to do that too. So then you get into December and February, and now's the time when you really get to start to think about planning and dreaming. You get to read your nature and gardening books and explore some online gardening programs and send for some seed catalogs and try to figure out what in the heck you're going to buy and start planning. What did you want to put in the garden this spring? So you looked at your garden in the fall. You saw some areas that you wanted to put something in, but you hadn't quite gotten that something picked out for the fall. Now's the time to start thinking about that. Some of my favorite books, of course, I told you about Doug Tallamy. And are all of you familiar with Doug Tallamy? If not, you want to become familiar with him, and so the winter is a good time to do that. So I went to see what is at our local library, because I love our local library, and I think that's the greatest place to go for everything, and certainly check there for a book before you buy it. But to see what other Doug Tallamy books they had. And the library has Bringing Nature Home, which is a wonderful book by Doug Tallamy. And then they have Nature's Best Hope, which I do not have. So you can go to our library and pick up a couple of Doug Tallamy books, and you will receive an amazing education on converting your landscape to a wild or more native landscape. He is probably one of the most talked about people in terms of that, and he has converted his own home and the property that he bought, a 3-acre subdivision home, into a wildlife habitat. And he tells you how to do it. So The Living Landscape was one of the first books that he co-authored with someone else. But these are wonderful resources to learn more. And then he has, his latest thing is called Homegrown National Park, and he is looking to have people convert their own space into a native plant wildlife habitat. And on homegrownnationalpark.org, and you can come up and write that down, he has some fabulous videos on there of a variety of subjects that will help educate you, give you more information about things, and get you excited over the winter about what you can do and how you can participate. So Doug Tallamy, and that is homegrownnationalpark.org. And then I went through and I'm like, you know, we always want more information about native plants. And we never seem to know exactly where do we go to get that information, how do we learn more about it, and even once we learn more about it, what do we do with it? So these two resources, Piedmont Native Plants. Is anyone familiar with this? I see some head shaking here. Love this book, and the reason that I like this book is because it has a resource and reference section here that is fabulous, that provides an unbelievable amount of information. But the front section is all plants that are native to our area: trees, shrubs, vines, and perennials. Okay, so this can be downloaded, and I wrote that down here so you can come and look at that. I'll put it up on the table up here. You can download this. It's 130 pages, or you can buy one for $13.50. I think is what it is now. But if you can download it and start looking at it on your computer at home in the wintertime when you don't have anything better to do. So there are a number of of garden centers and greenhouses that have the book for purchase. And I would say on this list, it is probably because they all have a native plant or two for sale. So might not be bad just to check all these out, and see what they have. If you're interested in native plants or something that you have found in particular that you'd like to see, learn more about, check these resources out. And I will put that up on the table too. And then this was a native plants for Northern Virginia. But it had an interesting section in it about trees, which is where I got the 15 oak trees in Virginia and the 7 that are the most common in nurseries. If you were going to buy an oak, and why would you? I mean, you could go out and get an acorn and plant it in the pot and get going on your own. But nonetheless, if you wanted to buy the 7 that would be the most common that you would find, and this too can be downloaded. So it has some really good information in it in the back too, really good information. And so that's plantnovanatives.org, and I'll leave that. Or you can purchase a hard copy. So I thought these were really 2 good reference sources that you can have at your fingertips. If you have a computer, you don't have to go anywhere, and you don't have to pay any money. So I told you that I would give you a few deer-friendly native plants from our experience at the butterfly garden. I saw some eyes roll there. Okay, all right. Now, the truth of the matter is, why did we put up a deer fence at the butterfly garden if you got, native plants that are deer resistant? But there were some that they didn't touch, so I'm going to share those with you. And one is wild blue indigo. And there is also a cultivar that is yellow. And we don't have that in the garden yet, but we are going to get some because the 2 of them together are beautiful. I saw them at Marie's Butterfly Garden in Richmond, and they have both the yellow and the purple. But this plant is beautiful, and it grows up and is almost like a bush in its appearance. The green leaves are beautiful all during the year, and they start to die back about in August. It starts to shrink back and not look as lovely, but up until then, it is beautiful, and it's got that gorgeous purple bloom on it in the spring. It's one of the fairly early bloomers, I would say by April into the first part of May. If you do seed pods, if you plant from seed, it'll be a couple years before you get blooms. So the other is the wild bergamot, the horse mint. And this is a July bloomer. And it's going to grow about this tall. It's in the mint family, so it's going to do some spreading. But it's not aggressive, easy to pull out. You don't like where it's going. We call it editing. We're going to edit in our garden. But that is another one that just gets covered with butterflies once it goes into bloom, and the deer don't touch it because it's in the mint family. Then the short-toothed mountain mint, and that is the one right in the front, surrounded by the butterfly garden sign. I love, love, love that plant. It is also in the mint family. It also is a spreader, but not aggressive, and it can be kind of kept under control by root pruning. So instead of cutting anything at the top, you're going to go dig up and prune down at the root level. I mean, you can dig it out with a shovel if you want, but you can also just control it by keeping the roots pruned back and keep it where you want it. But these become pollinator factories for 2 months in July and August. These plants will be covered with all kinds of little bees, beetles, all the little teeny guys because it's a very small flower. The top of the plant will actually get kind of a white, gray, haze look to it. That is the bloom. But it just becomes a pollinator factory. You can just stand there for hours and watch what's going on there. There's so much activity and so busy. And we've got that in several sections out at the butterfly garden now, and it started from 3 plants. Maybe they were in 6-inch pots. So it will spread rather quickly. So if you've got a spot that we want something filled in. Now the one thing about the butterfly garden that I have to say is it's full sun. And so that is always an issue too for the folks who live at the lake, because you are not only fighting the deer every day, but you also are shaded. And how do you come up with the plants? And I don't have a good answer for you today on that. I can tell you these plants are the ones that we've had success with keeping, that the deer don't eat, but they are full sun, okay? I would say that the short-toothed mountain mint can probably take dappled. It could probably do less than that. If it got partial sun, it would probably be okay. Some people, we had a master gardener who had a really, pretty good sloping hillside, and she put that on there. She could not be happier but it is in full sun where she put it. And then the beard tongue, which I love this plant too. So this is a bloomer in the springtime. Right now we only have white in the garden, but there is a pink and a blue. So there are it does come in other colors. What I love about this plant, not only is the bloom itself so beautiful, but the plant will come up, it'll bloom, it'll start to die back. We'll cut it back, we'll cut the bloom stalks back, and the plant itself will stay nice, mounded, low mounded, and it turns red in the fall. And it never completely goes away in the wintertime. It is still showing some green and some red throughout the winter. But I love it because it changes with the seasons, and when it's red in the fall, it's beautiful. It's just the, foliage, but it's beautiful. The beard tongue, white beard tongue. And then yarrow, so the deer don't bother it. It is green, it spreads. It's really very, very pretty. And if you have an area where you need something low, you need it to fill in, yarrow is a great plant to do that. The thing about it is it loves to spread everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. So if you don't really, keep up with your yarrow, you will have a garden full of yarrow. And it will start showing up in places where you had no yarrow anywhere around it. But the deer don't bother it. So I've got to tell you, the butterflies love that flower, and the deer don't bother the plant. So those are just a few of the tried and true that we have that I'm like, we know, even without a deer fence, those were the things they didn't bother. As master gardeners, our role really is to help educate the public and the citizens of Fluvanna County in particular, because we are the Fluvanna Master Gardeners, to help educate, to be available to answer your horticultural questions. If you have them, we're at the library every Tuesday through the end of October from 2 to 5 to help answer questions if you have them. But in order to support some of the projects, the scholarships that we give, and we do give a horticultural scholarship to a high school graduating senior. We send kids to 4-H camp on scholarship. There's a number of different things that we do, and we raise that money through our plant sale that we have every year. So we really are working hard at propagating these native plants that we have at the Butterfly Garden so we can make them available in the springtime. And we did have a number of them available this last April, and we're going to try to have even more this April coming up, because we know native plants are hard to find, and we want them to be available to our citizens of Fluvanna at an affordable price and a decent plant. So we're working on that. And with that, this is our greenhouse that's going in at the Butterfly Garden. So again, we have a family who is very invested in the Butterfly Garden. And we started talking about, gee, we'd really like to have a greenhouse, and we could propagate, we could do this and do that. And that's a lot of enthusiasm. So the next thing we knew, there he is, he's building it, and he said, when I'm done, it's yours. It's for you, the Fluvanna Master Gardeners, to use however you decide you're going to use it, to set it up. So he is moving right along on a greenhouse out there at the Butterfly Garden. So again, we it's a demonstration. It's something that you can do. It's something you can come and look at. If you've thought about a greenhouse in your own, come see what design he's putting up. It's going to have solar heat in it when he's done. It's going to have water running to it. He was a physicist by profession, and his brain works like that. And when he's done, we're going to have a greenhouse. But anyway, it's an opportunity for us to make those native plants available to the community, which we are trying to do. As we get older, and I get older, things that we could do at one time, we're not quite physically up to doing now, and we're not maybe going to even be up to it as much a couple years from now. So when we think about the things, let's think about how can we do things easier? How can we make sure that whatever we're going to purchase now is something we still can use, a couple years from now? But how do we keep up with our gardening as we age, basically? When you're shredding leaves, walnut, eucalyptus, and camphor laurel, if those are trees that you have in your yard, you don't want to put that mulched leaf directly on your garden. It needs to compost down with other leaves before you use it. So, walnuts, does anybody have walnut trees? Because they're so hard. Yeah. They're a tough tree because they impact so much around them, both underground and above ground. So, but other than that, it doesn't matter. This little batch I have here is just a combination. Mostly, I was noticing of maple because that's where some birch is in here. But that's where I was picking the pile up from, was under that tree. So it doesn't matter, and the wind is going to blow them all together anyway. So. Doesn't matter. Again, I think you try to not fight what is natural here. And as frustrating as that is going to be, maybe some indoor plants. I mean, really, you start to rethink, what is it? Why do I want this green around me? What is it that I want? What could I do instead? Maybe some garden art, which I would absolutely, make that a focal point in your garden instead of a plant that's going to get eaten. But just a lot of thinking and planning before you spend any money. That's just going to be my biggest recommendation. And then talking to the people at the nurseries who are the experts. That is the biggest thing. Oh, my time's up. Thank you all. Thank you. I just want to say I really appreciate your time and your coming today. I hope that you got something beneficial out of this. Stop up and take a look at the leaves, run your fingers through the things. There are soil sample or soil test kits over here for anyone who needs that. There's a butterfly garden brochure here, and I think that there are some other brochure things that you can pick up too. If you want some of the website addresses, I've got those too. So, but thank you so much for letting me spend some time with you this afternoon. Yeah.